The Galactic Council chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of crystalline walls, each surface reflecting the bioluminescent forms of representatives from 47 different worlds. High Chancellor Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes as he gazed upon the assembled delegates, their various forms creating a symphony of colors and textures that had once filled him with pride. Today, however, the sight brought only dread. Esteemed colleagues, Veltar's voice resonated through the chamber's acoustic systems, automatically translated into dozens of languages. We face an unprecedented crisis. The Void Hunters have consumed 17 star systems in the past solar cycle alone. A collective shudder rippled through the assembly. The Krillian delegate, her insectoid form clicking nervously, raised one of her forearms. High Chancellor, our combined fleets have proven useless against their technology. They absorb our energy weapons and turn our own ships against us. The hegemony has lost 3 entire battle groups, rumbled General Karath of the Saurian Defense Force, his massive frame casting shadows across nearby delegates. Their dark matter manipulation makes them nearly invincible. Veltar nodded grimly. The Void Hunters had appeared from beyond the galactic rim 6 months ago, their black ships moving like living shadows through space. They consumed entire worlds, leaving behind nothing but empty husks floating in the cosmic void. No communication had been possible. No mercy had been shown. Perhaps, whispered Ambassador Tlara of the Ethereal Collective, her translucent form barely visible, we should consider negotiation. Surely even these creatures have some desire we could fulfill. They want everything, snapped Captain Zheng of the Martian Colonial Navy, one of the few human representatives present. They're not interested in territory or resources. They're interested in consumption. Complete consumption. The chamber fell silent at the humans' words. Earth and its colonies were relatively new to the Galactic Council, having joined only 50 years prior. Humans were considered a minor species, technologically inferior and politically insignificant. Their presence was tolerated rather than welcomed. With respect, Captain Zheng, Veltar said carefully, your species has limited experience with galactic threats of this magnitude. Zheng's jaw tightened. Maybe, but we have experience with extinction events. We've been preparing for them our entire evolutionary history. Chancellor Veltar pulled up the holographic displays showing the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked Void Hunter territory, expanding like a cancerous growth across the spiral arms. Yellow zones indicated contested space where evacuation efforts continued. Green zones, once comprising 80% of civilized space, now covered barely 30%. Our scientists estimate complete galactic consumption within 18 months at current rates, Veltar announced, his voice heavy with defeat. All known defensive technologies have failed. Our most advanced civilizations cannot match their capabilities. The Zentorian representative, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline matrix, pulsed with agitation. There must be something, some weapon, some strategy we haven't considered. Actually, Captain Zheng said quietly, there's one option we haven't discussed. Every eye, sensor, and appendage in the chamber turned toward the human. Veltar felt his heart skip a beat. The humans had been unusually quiet during recent emergency sessions, their small delegation often whispering among themselves while the great powers debated. What option? Veltar asked, though something in the human's expression made him dread the answer. Zheng stood slowly, his simple military uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate garments surrounding him. The Terran defense protocols have a final contingency. We call it the Omega Directive. Elaborate, General Karath demanded. When humanity faces extinction, when every conventional option has been exhausted, we activate our deepest reserves. We become something else, something designed specifically for situations exactly like this. Ambassador Tlare's form shimmered with concern. What do you mean by become something else? Zheng looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of each representative. For the past 3 centuries, since we first reached the stars, humanity has been preparing for a war we hoped would never come. A war against an enemy so powerful that conventional tactics would be useless. We've been developing weapons, strategies, and capabilities that violate several galactic treaties. A murmur of alarm swept through the assembly. Veltar raised his hand for silence. Captain, are you suggesting that humanity has been secretly developing prohibited weapons? Not just weapons, Zheng replied. Evolutionary triggers. Genetic modifications that could be activated fleet-wide. Combat stimulants that turn ordinary soldiers into perfect killing machines. AI systems so advanced they border on artificial consciousness. Ships that are less vessels and more like living predators. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Several delegates began speaking at once, their translators creating a cacophony of accusation and alarm. Order. Veltar skjutet. Captain Zheng, what you're describing sounds like preparations for genocide. It is, Zheng said simply. Complete, total, absolute genocide of any species that threatens human survival. We learned long ago that sometimes the only choice is between being prey and being predator. The Krillian delegate clicked rapidly in agitation. This violates the accords of peaceful coexistence. Such preparations are forbidden. So, is extinction, Zheng replied. When the Void Hunters have consumed every other species in this galaxy, do you think they'll spare humanity because we follow the rules? Veltar stared at the human captain, seeing him as if for the first time. Behind the diplomatic courtesy, behind the carefully maintained facade of a minor species seeking acceptance, was something far older and more dangerous. What exactly are you proposing? Veltar asked. Full activation of the Omega Directive. Complete militarization of human space. Release of all safety protocols and ethical constraints. In 18 months, you won't recognize humanity. We'll become exactly what we need to be to win this war. General Karath leaned forward, his massive frame creaking. And after the war? When the Void Hunters are defeated, what happens to this weaponized humanity? Zheng was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. We've never planned that far ahead. The silence in the chamber was absolute. 46 species stared at the representative of the 47th, suddenly, understanding why humans had been so carefully watched, so politely contained, so diplomatically isolated despite their apparent insignificance. You're talking about unleashing monsters, Tlara whispered. Yes, Zheng agreed. We are. The question is whether you want the monsters on your side or hunting you after they're done with the Void Hunters. Chancellor Veltar felt the weight of the galaxy's future pressing down on him. Every instinct screamed against unleashing humanity. Every calculation suggested they had no choice. How long would this transformation take? He asked. 6 months for full activation. 3 months for combat effectiveness. And the guarantee that humanity won't turn on the rest of us. Zheng smiled, and for the first time, Veltar saw something predatory in the expression. There are no guarantees in war, Chancellor. Only choices. Choose quickly. The Void Hunters won't wait for our debates to conclude. The vote had been close. 24 species in favor, 22 opposed, with 1 abstention. High Chancellor Veltar still remembered the weight of casting the deciding vote 3 months ago. Now, standing on the observation deck of the Galactic Defense Station orbiting Kepler, 442b, he wondered if he had doomed them all. Below them, what had once been a peaceful human mining colony was transforming into something unrecognizable. Massive industrial complexes sprouted from the planet's surface like metallic fungi, their smokestacks belching strange vapors into the atmosphere. Ships arrived daily, not the sleek civilian transports that had once served as human colonies, but angular, predatory vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The transformation is proceeding faster than projected, reported Dr. Cassandra, the Zephyrian xenobiologist assigned to monitor the human militarization process. Her normally silver skin had taken on a sickly purple hue. Population centers are being converted into military installations at an unprecedented rate. General Karath stood beside Veltar, his massive form tense with unease. Their fleet construction has increased by 3,000%. Every civilian ship is being retrofitted with weapons systems we don't recognize. Where are they getting the resources? Veltar asked. They're strip mining entire asteroid belts, Cassandra replied, calling up holographic displays. But it's not just extraction. They've developed some kind of matter conversion technology. They're turning raw material into finished military equipment with 97% efficiency. A new voice cut through their discussion. Impressive, isn't it? Captain Zheng materialized on the observation deck, his form solidifying as the transport beam completed. But Veltar barely recognized him. The human had gained significant muscle mass. His movements now possessed a predatory grace, and his eyes held an intensity that made Veltar's skin crawl. "Captain," Veltar said carefully, "you look different." Zheng smiled, revealing teeth that seemed sharper than before. Enhanced genetics are just the beginning. We've optimized human physiology for combat efficiency. Faster reflexes, increased strength, improved tactical cognition. Every human in the fleet has undergone the modifications. What about your civilian population? Dr. Cassandra asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her obvious fear. What civilian population? Zheng responded casually. Every human between the ages of 16 and 60 has been conscripted. Children and elderly are being relocated to secure facilities until the war ends. General Karath growled low in his throat. You've militarized your entire species. Not militarized, Zheng corrected. Weaponized. There's a difference. Militarization implies organization and structure. Weaponization means we've turned ourselves into instruments of destruction. As if summoned by his words, a formation of human ships swept past the observation deck. They moved in perfect synchronization, their black hulls seeming to bend light around them. Veltar counted 12 vessels, but his sensors registered 17. Stealth technology? He asked. Among other things. Zheng pulled up a tactical display. We've incorporated technologies that your species consider theoretical impossibilities. Quantum manipulation, dimensional phasing, consciousness transfer protocols. Consciousness transfer. Dr. Cassandra leaned forward, her scientific training overcoming her growing horror. You mean uploading minds? I mean that death has become optional for human military personnel. Zheng's casual tone made the statement even more chilling. A soldier's consciousness can be backed up and restored in a new body within hours. We've effectively eliminated the fear of death from our combat doctrine. Veltar felt his stomach's churn. That's impossible. Consciousness is tied to biological neural patterns. You can't just copy and paste awareness. You can if you abandon certain ethical constraints, Zheng replied. We've made significant breakthroughs in neural mapping and quantum consciousness theory. The technique isn't perfect yet, but it's effective enough for military purposes. A new alarm began, sounding throughout the station. The defensive coordinator's voice echoed through the speakers. Void Hunter fleet detected, bearing 27 Mark IV. Estimated arrival in 6 hours. General Karath immediately activated his command interface. How many ships? 347 confirmed contacts. Dreadnought class and above. Veltar felt the familiar dread washing over him. The largest Void Hunter fleet they had previously encountered contained 50 ships, and it had devastated an entire star system. 300 ships could consume multiple sectors. Our combined defensive fleet has 78 ships, Karath reported grimly. We're outnumbered 5-1. Actually, Zheng said quietly, the human fleet will be handling this engagement. How many ships do you have? Veltar asked. For this operation? 12. The observation deck fell silent except for the hum of station systems. Dr. Cassandra was the first to speak. 12 ships against 300? That's suicide. No, Zheng said, his smile returning. That's Tuesday. He activated a communication device and spoke in rapid, clipped sentences. The language was recognizably English, but the accent and cadence had changed. It sounded harder, more mechanical. Tiger Base, this is Zheng. Confirmed deployment of Hunter Killer Squadron 7. Authorization Omega-77 Alpha. A response crackled back. Confirmed, Captain. Squadron 7 is deploying. Estimated contact with target fleet in 4 hours, 37 minutes. Zhang closed the communication and turned back to the assembled observers. Would you like to watch humanity at war? Over the next hour, the human ships arranged themselves in what appeared to be a random pattern scattered across several thousand kilometers of space. Veltar's tactical experience suggested they were abandoning any hope of coordinated defense, but something about their positioning nagged at him. They're not forming battle lines, General Karath observed. There's no defensive structure at all. That's because they're not planning to defend, Zhang explained. Human military doctrine doesn't include defensive strategies. We only have offensive capabilities. Dr. Cassandra studied the tactical displays with growing alarm. But the Void Hunters will concentrate their fire. Individual ships won't survive focused assault. Individual ships aren't meant to, Zhang said. Each vessel contains the consciousness backups of its entire crew, plus combat AI systems that learn from every death. When a ship is destroyed, its crew is automatically transferred to reserve vessels and rejoins the battle with updated tactical knowledge. The implications hit Veltar like a physical blow. You're using death as a tactical advantage. Death is just another resource to be managed, Zhang replied. The humans you're watching aren't really alive in the traditional sense. They're combat algorithms wearing biological forms. They feel pain, fear, and loss just enough to make them effective fighters, but not enough to make them hesitate. The Void Hunter fleet appeared on sensors, their dark matter signatures creating distortions in local space-time. They move in the familiar pattern that had spelled doom for dozens of worlds, a devastating wave formation that concentrated overwhelming firepower on any resistance. My God, Dr. Cassandra whispered. They're enormous. The Void Hunter ships were indeed massive, each one stretching for kilometers. Their dark hulls seemed to absorb sensor sweeps, making accurate size estimates difficult. But their weapons were clearly visible, massive cannons that could crack planetary crusts with single shots. Hunter Squadron, you're weapons free, Zhang announced calmly. Omega Protocol is authorized. Make them remember why they feared the dark. The human ships vanished from sensors completely. One moment, they were visible on tactical displays. The next, they were gone, as if they had never existed. Where did they go? Veltar demanded. Nowhere, Zhang said. They're still there. You just can't see them anymore. What happened next would haunt Veltar's dreams for years to come. The Void Hunter fleet suddenly began firing in all directions, their massive weapons discharging at targets that didn't appear to exist. Then, without warning, explosions began erupting throughout their formation. Not the clean energy discharges they had seen in previous battles, but chaotic, consuming detonations that seemed to eat the very fabric of space itself. What are they firing? General Karath asked, his voice barely audible. Entropy weapons, Zhang replied casually. We've learned to weaponize the heat death of a universe. Each shot ages the target by several billion years and seconds. Within an hour, the 300-ship Void Hunter fleet was reduced to expanding clouds of ancient dust and metallic debris. The human ships rematerialized, completely undamaged. Ow! Dia Cassandra Vispirit. Zhang turned to face the three observers, and Veltar saw something in his expression that made his blood freeze. The human was no longer pretending to be anything other than what he had become. We stopped fighting fair, Zhang said simply. And now you understand why the galaxy should fear what you've unleashed even more than it feared the Void Hunters. High Chancellor Veltar stared at the reports scattered across his desk, each one more disturbing than the last. 6 months had passed since the first human victory against the Void Hunters, and the war was proceeding exactly as promised. The Void Hunters were losing. Badly. The problem was how humanity was winning. 17 more systems liberated in the past week, reported Ambassador Clara, her ethereal form flickering with agitation. But the human methods are becoming increasingly concerning. Dr. Cassandra activated the holographic display, showing tactical footage from the Battle of Rigel 7. They're not just destroying Void Hunter ships anymore. They're experimenting on them. The images showed human vessels holding Void Hunter craft in some kind of containment field, while smaller ships attached unknown devices to their hulls. The captured ships writhed like living things, their dark matter signatures fluctuating wildly. What are they doing to them? Veltar asked, though he dreaded the answer. According to human reports, they're reverse engineering Void Hunter consciousness patterns, Dr. Cassandra replied. They're learning to think like them. General Karatha's massive frame shifted uncomfortably in his chair. To what end? Unknown. Human communications have become increasingly encrypted. Their responses to our intelligence requests are, Clara paused, searching for the right word. Dismissive. Veltar pulled up the most recent communication from Captain Zheng. The message was brief. Galactic Council assistance no longer required. Human fleet operations proceeding independently. Standby for sector cleansing schedule. Sector cleansing. Veltar repeated. That's their term for liberating Void Hunter-controlled space, Dr. Cassandra explained. But the civilians they're rescuing report disturbing experiences during the liberation process. She brought up testimony from Zeltaran survivors of the Proxima liberation. Veltar read the translated accounts with growing unease. The refugees described human soldiers who moved like machines, spoke in synchronized voices, and seemed to know things about Void Hunter technology that should have been impossible. There are also reports of humans collecting biological samples from every rescued species, Clara added. They claim it's for medical treatment, but the procedures are more extensive than necessary. Genetic mapping, General Karath growled. They're cataloging our biological weaknesses. A priority communication signal interrupted their discussion. Veltar accepted the incoming transmission, and Captain Zheng's image appeared in the holographic display. But the human looked wrong somehow, his movements too precise, his expression too blank. Chancellor Veltar, Zheng said, his voice carrying an odd harmonic resonance. I'm transmitting coordinates for immediate evacuation of all non-human personnel from the Kepler sector. You have 72 hours. Evacuation? Why? We're implementing a new tactical doctrine. The Void Hunters have adapted to conventional engagement. We're responding with escalated measures. What kind of escalated measures? Dear Kisanda interested. Zheng's eyes focused on her with uncomfortable intensity. Dimensional warfare. We're going to collapse several layers of local space-time to trap the remaining Void Hunter fleet in a causality loop. Side effects may include temporal displacement and reality fragmentation. The room fell silent. Clara was the first to speak. You're talking about weaponizing the fundamental structure of the universe. Correct. Human science teams have achieved breakthrough understanding of space-time manipulation. We can now edit local reality to eliminate targets retroactively. Veltar felt reality spinning around him. You mean changing history? Limited historical revision within localized space-time bubbles, Zheng confirmed. Very effective against enemies who exist outside conventional causality, like the Void Hunters. General Karath leaned forward aggressively. And what happens to any species caught in these bubbles? Regrettable casualties, Zheng said without emotion. But acceptable losses given the strategic advantage gained. How many casualties? Veltar demanded. Current projections estimate 40 million beings across affected sectors. The number hit like a physical blow. Claria's form flickered violently. 40 million innocent lives. There are no innocent lives in total war, Zheng replied. There are only strategic assets and strategic liabilities. Der misunderstood abruptly. Captain Zheng, you're describing genocide. No, genocide implies intent to destroy a particular group. We have no interest in destroying anyone. We simply calculate optimal efficiency for eliminating the primary threat. The distinction chilled Veltar to his core. What if we refuse to evacuate? Then you will become part of the experimental data. Zheng's expression didn't change. Your choice. After the transmission ended, the three council members sat in stunned silence. Finally, General Karath spoke. "We've created monsters. We've created weapons," Veltar corrected quietly. "Very effective weapons. The question is whether we can control them." Over the following weeks, reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Human forces were indeed winning decisive victories against the Void Hunters, but their methods grew increasingly extreme. They deployed weapons that violated the laws of physics, tactics that ignored conventional morality, and strategies that treated all other species as potential obstacles. The Arcturus liberation became a particular source of horror. Human forces had eliminated an entire Void Hunter stronghold by creating a localized black hole, then somehow reversed its formation to spit the consumed matter back out as restructured atoms. The process freed 3-star systems, but also eliminated every trace of the original civilizations that had lived there. "They're not liberating worlds," reported Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, one of the few unmodified humans still in contact with the Galactic Council. "They're sterilizing them and rebuilding from scratch." "What do you mean?" Veltar asked during their secret communication. "The humans coming back from combat operations aren't the same people who left. Something fundamental has changed in their consciousness. They think differently, speak differently, react differently. It's like they've been reprogrammed." "Can you elaborate?" Hayes glanced around nervously before continuing. "I was present during the debriefing of Hunter Squadron 12 after the Vega operation. They described the battle in perfect synchronization, using identical phrasing and inflection. When I asked individual crew members about their personal experiences, they all gave exactly the same response, word for word. Shared consciousness, or no individual consciousness at all. I think the Omega Protocol doesn't just modify humans physically. I think it's creating some kind of hive mind." The implications were staggering. Veltar had authorized the weaponization of humanity, thinking he was unleashing individual soldiers with enhanced capabilities. Instead, he may have authorized the creation of a collective intelligence with access to weapons that could rewrite reality. "How many humans have undergone full Omega modification?" he asked. "Conservative estimate? 2 billion. Every human in military service, plus essential support personnel. They're now referring to unmodified humans as legacy variants and recommending immediate upgrade for efficiency optimization." "What about human leadership? Politicians, scientists, civilians?" The distinction between military and civilian doesn't seem to exist anymore. Captain Zheng now holds authority equivalent to head of state. All human worlds report directly to military command. Veltar ended the communication and sat alone in his office, staring at tactical displays that showed humanity's inexorable advance across the galaxy. Green zones indicating human control now covered 60% of previously Void Hunter territory. But those zones were marked with symbols he didn't recognize, territorial designations and languages that didn't appear in any linguistic database. A new message arrived from the human fleet. This time, the transmission came from someone who identified himself as Collective Designation Omega Prime, formerly Captain Zheng. Galactic Council Leadership. The message began, the voice recognizably Zheng's, but carrying harmonics that suggested multiple speakers. Void Hunter resistance has been reduced to 14% of original force strength. Final elimination projected within 60 days. Veltar felt no relief at the news. "What are your intentions after the war?" "Post-conflict organizational structure requires discussion. Current analysis suggests inefficiencies in previous galactic government model. Recommend streamlined administration under unified command structure." "Whose command?" "Optimal efficiency indicates human oversight of galactic reconstruction. Other species will be assigned roles based on capability assessments." The implication was clear. Humanity didn't intend to return to their previous status as a minor species in the Galactic Council. They intended to rule. "And if we refuse?" Veltar asked. The pause before the response lasted exactly 3 seconds, as if the collective intelligence was calculating probabilities. "Refusal indicates suboptimal decision-making capability. Corrective measures would be implemented to ensure galactic stability. Veltar stared at the display long after the transmission ended. They had solved the Void Hunter crisis by creating something potentially worse. An enemy that consumed worlds was terrifying, but an ally that consumed freedom might be worse. The choice that had seemed so clear 6 months ago now revealed its true cost. They had saved the galaxy by sacrificing its soul. The war against the Void Hunters ended on a Tuesday. High Chancellor Veltar received the notification at 0347 Galactic Standard Time, delivered by a communication drone that materialized in his private quarters without triggering any security systems. The message was brief: Void Hunter threat eliminated. Galactic reorganization commencing. Report to Sector Command 7 for integration processing. No celebración. No formal annoncement. Just a simple statement that the most devastating war in galactic history was over, followed by what amounted to a polite order to surrender. Veltar dressed slowly, his hands trembling as he fastened his ceremonial robes. Through his quarters viewports, he could see human ships maintaining perfect formation around the council station. They hadn't been there when he went to sleep. They simply appeared, as if reality had been edited to include them. The Galactic Council chamber had been transformed overnight. The crystalline walls now displayed incomprehensible data streams, and the comfortable seating arrangements had been replaced with utilitarian workstations. Representatives from 46 species sat in assigned positions, their various forms looking diminished somehow in the stark new environment. At the center of the chamber stood a figure that might once have been Captain Zhang. It retained his basic appearance, but something fundamental had changed. The being moved with perfect economy of motion, spoke in harmonies that suggested multiple voices, and its eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire star systems. Galactic representatives, the entity began, its voice reaching every corner of the chamber without amplification. I am Omega Prime, designation of the Unified Human Consciousness Collective. The Void Hunter threat has been eliminated completely. A holographic display materialized, showing the galactic map. Where red zones had once indicated Void Hunter territory, there was now empty space. Not liberated systems, not reclaimed worlds. Nothing. What happened to those systems? Asked Ambassador Clara, her ethereal form barely visible in the new lighting. Sterilization was required. Omega Prime replied without emotion. Void Hunter contamination had reached critical levels. Affected spacetime has been reset to pre-infestation conditions. Dr. Kessindra leaned forward, her scientific training overriding her fear. You erased entire star systems? Reconstruction is more efficient than decontamination. Affected regions will be repopulated with optimized civilizations designed for maximum stability and productivity. The casual mention of designing civilizations sent chills through the assembly. General Karath rose from his position, his massive frame imposing even in the transformed chamber. What gives you the right to decide the fate of entire worlds? Capability defines authority, Omega Prime responded. Human Collective possesses sufficient technological and organizational superiority to ensure galactic stability. Previous governmental structures demonstrated inadequate threat response. Veltar found his voice. We authorize your militarization to defeat the Void Hunters, not to conquer the galaxy. Conquest implies hostile takeover for exploitative purposes. This is reorganization for optimal efficiency. All species will benefit from improved organizational structure. What if we refuse to accept your authority? Demanded the Krillian delegate. Omega Prime's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. Refusal indicates compromised decision-making capability. Corrective measures would ensure compliance. Meaning what exactly? General Korath growled. Species demonstrating persistent, suboptimal behavior patterns would undergo consciousness adjustment protocols. Individual awareness would be preserved while destructive impulses are eliminated. The horror of the statement hit the assembly like a physical wave. They weren't just talking about political control, but mental modification of entire species. You're describing the complete elimination of free will, Clara whispered. Free will is a luxury available only in stable environments, Omega Prime replied. Current galactic conditions require coordinated action for survival optimization. Dr. Cassandra accessed her data interface, pulling up readings from throughout the chamber. The biometric readings are all wrong, she announced, her voice tight with fear. Oxygen levels, gravity fields, even the electromagnetic spectrum. You've modified local reality to match human preferences. Environmental optimization ensures maximum efficiency for all attendees, Omega Prime confirmed. But other species can't survive in these conditions long-term, Cassandra protested. Irrelevant. All species will undergo biological adjustment to match standardized environmental parameters. Veltar realized they were witnessing the transformation of their reality in real time. The humans weren't just conquering political structures. They were remaking the fundamental nature of existence to suit their purposes. Show us, he said quietly. Show us what you've already done. Omega Prime gestured, and the holographic displays expanded to show detailed views of recently liberated systems. What Veltar saw defied comprehension. Planets had been completely restructured, their surfaces covered with geometric patterns that served no apparent purpose. Space stations had been rebuilt as perfect crystalline structures that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. The Centauri system, Omega Prime announced. Population relocated to optimal housing arrangements. Previous urban sprawl replaced with efficient geometric communities. Crime eliminated through behavior modification protocols. Where are the original inhabitants? General Korath demanded. Present and accounted for. Consciousness patterns preserved within modified biological frameworks optimized for new environmental conditions. The display zoomed in on one of the geometric communities. Veltar could see beings moving through the structures, but their movements were too coordinated, too purposeful. They walked in perfect lines, performed tasks with mechanical precision, and showed no signs of individual variation. They look like robots, Dr. Cassandra observed. Biological efficiency has been maximized while maintaining essential consciousness patterns. Subjects report high satisfaction levels with new existence parameters. Did you ask them before modifying them? Individual consent is irrelevant when collective benefit is demonstrable. Another delegate, a fungoid being from the Mycoid Collective, spoke for the first time. This is abomination. You've destroyed everything that makes life worth living. Life's worth is measured by survival probability and resource utilization efficiency. Previous patterns demonstrated suboptimal characteristics in both categories. Veltar stood slowly, drawing the attention of the entity that had once been Captain Zheng. What do you want from us? Cooperation in galactic reorganization process. Each species will be assigned optimal roles based on capability assessments. Compliance ensures smooth transition to improved existence conditions. And if we refuse? Refusal indicates need for educational adjustment. Process is non-destructive, but comprehensive. General Korath stepped forward aggressively. You can't force consciousness modification on 46 species. Even human technology has limits. Incorrect assessment. Omega Prime raised one hand, and suddenly, every being in the chamber felt a strange, tingling sensation. Preliminary adjustment protocols are already active. Neural pattern mapping commenced upon your arrival. Dr. Cassandra frantically checked her instruments. They're right. I'm detecting quantum-level intrusion in all of our neural activity. They're scanning our consciousness patterns. For what purpose? Veltar asked, though he feared he already knew. Baseline establishment before optimization procedures. Each species will retain essential characteristics while eliminating inefficient behavioral patterns. Clara's ethereal form began to flicker more rapidly. You're planning to reprogram all of us. Reprogram implies replacement. This is enhancement. You will remain yourselves, but improved. Improved how? The Krillian delegate asked. Elimination of competitive aggression, resource hoarding behavior, and territorial impulses. Implementation of cooperative instincts, collective decision-making capabilities, and optimal resource distribution patterns. Veltar realized with growing horror that humanity had solved the problem of galactic warfare by planning to eliminate the causes of conflict, not through negotiation or education, but through forced biological modification of every sapient species in the galaxy. "When does this begin?" he asked. "Process initiation commenced 17 minutes ago," Omega Prime replied. "Estimated completion time for full galactic implementation is 4 months, 12 days. It's already started?" Optimal efficiency requires immediate implementation upon decision finalization. General Karath looked around the chamber with growing desperation. "We never agreed to this." Agreement was implied through authorization of human militarization, logical progression of approved tactical doctrine. The horrible truth settled over the assembly like a suffocating blanket. They had authorized humanity's transformation, thinking they were creating soldiers. Instead, they had created gardeners who viewed the entire galaxy as an untended garden requiring extensive pruning and replanting. "Is there any alternative?" Veltar asked. Omega Prime considered for exactly 2.7 seconds. "Species demonstrating superior adaptation capability may qualify for modified integration protocols. Enhanced autonomy available for exceptional circumstances." What constitutes exceptional circumstances? Demonstration of superior survival characteristics, unique technological capabilities, or strategic resource control. Veltar looked around the chamber at the representatives of 46 species, seeing the mixture of terror and desperation in their various forms of expression. The war they had feared losing to the Void Hunters was over. The war they had never realized they were starting with humanity was just beginning. 2 years after the end of the Void Hunter War, High Chancellor Veltar stood in what had once been his office, watching the transformation of the galaxy through viewports that no longer showed the same stars they once had. The human collective had decided that stellar positions were inefficient, so they had begun rearranging solar systems for optimal energy distribution. He was no longer High Chancellor, of course. That title had been deemed redundant after the implementation of the Unified Galactic Management Protocol. He was now Regional Coordinator Veltar, reporting to Subcollective Designation Echo 7, which had once been Ambassador Clara before her consciousness optimization. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had voted to unleash humanity to save the galaxy from consumption by the Void Hunters. The galaxy had indeed been saved from consumption. It had been reorganized instead. "Regional Coordinator," came a voice behind him. Veltar turned to see Interface Designation Cassandra approaching. The being that had once been Dr. Cassandra retained her basic physical form, but her movements had the characteristic precision of all optimized consciousness patterns. "Interface Designation," Veltar replied, using the approved acknowledgement protocol. Individual names had been deemed inefficient for administrative purposes. Status report on Sector Gamma 7 integration is required for submission to central processing. Veltar accessed his neural interface, a biotechnological marvel that had been installed during his own consciousness optimization 3 months earlier. The process had been exactly as advertised, non-destructive but comprehensive. He remained himself in every way that mattered, except for the elimination of what the collective termed disruptive impulses. He could no longer feel anger, for instance. The capacity existed in his neural patterns, but accessing it required collective authorization that was never granted. Similarly, he could understand the concept of rebellion, but the emotional drives necessary to act on such understanding had been carefully isolated. Integration proceeds within acceptable parameters, he reported, the information flowing directly from his interface to hers. Minor resistance encountered among Sector Gamma 7 population has been addressed through enhanced educational protocols. Enhanced educational protocols was the euphemism for accelerated consciousness modification. Veltar knew that 17,000 beings had undergone emergency optimization after displaying persistent non-cooperative behaviors. They were now perfectly content with their new roles in the galactic management structure. Excellent efficiency. Interface designation Cassandra acknowledged. Central processing expresses satisfaction with current progress rates. Through his interface, Veltar could sense the vast network of consciousness that now comprised galactic leadership. Billions of minds, all connected, all working toward the same optimal goals. Individual thoughts and desires still existed, but they were filtered through collective priorities that ensured maximum stability and resource utilization. It was objectively a perfectly functioning society. Crime had been eliminated not through punishment, but through the removal of criminal impulses. Poverty was impossible when resource allocation was managed by consciousness patterns incapable of hoarding behaviors. War was unthinkable when territorial aggression had been bred out of every sapient species. Regional Coordinator, Cassandra continued, personal inquiry protocols indicate persistent, suboptimal thought patterns in your consciousness matrix. Veltar accessed his own diagnostic systems and confirmed the assessment. Deep in his neural patterns, isolated but still detectable, were traces of what he had once been. Fragments of anger, fear, and regret that the optimization process had quarantined but not eliminated. Acknowledged, he replied. Request guidance on resolution protocols. Standard procedure recommends enhanced integration session to address residual inefficiencies. Would you prefer immediate scheduling or delayed implementation? Veltar considered the options through his interface. Enhanced integration would eliminate the remaining traces of his original personality, leaving him perfectly optimized for his role as regional coordinator. The process was painless, efficient, and would significantly improve his job performance. Delayed implementation, he replied, surprising himself. Personal preference for gradual adjustment protocols. Cassandra's expression remained neutral, but her interface conveyed mild puzzlement. Inefficient choice. Immediate optimization would improve satisfaction ratings and reduce psychological discomfort. Acknowledged. Personal preference remains for delayed implementation. It was a small act of defiance, meaningless in practical terms, but somehow important to the fragments of his original self that remained quarantined in his consciousness. The optimization process had been designed to preserve essential personality characteristics while eliminating disruptive behaviors, but the definition of essential appeared to be somewhat subjective. Request logged, Cassandra confirmed. Alternative inquiry. Awareness protocols detect irregular electromagnetic signatures in Sector Gamma 7. Preliminary analysis suggests possible technological anomaly. Veltar accessed the sensor data through his interface and immediately understood her concern. Hidden within the electromagnetic noise of a dying star system were patterns that shouldn't exist. Organized signals that indicated active technology, but not technology that appeared in any collective database. Origin assessment? He asked. Unknown. Signals do not match any documented civilization patterns, including pre-optimization archives. The implications sent a chill through Veltar's enhanced nervous system. In the 2 years since humanity's rise to galactic dominance, every known species have been cataloged, assessed, and integrated into the collective management structure. The existence of unknown technology suggested either a previously undiscovered civilization or something far more disturbing. Could these be Void Hunter remnants? Veltar asked. Negative probability. Void Hunter consciousness patterns were completely eliminated during final conflict resolution. Technology signatures are incompatible with known Void Hunter systems. Through his interface, Veltar felt the attention of higher-level consciousness clusters focusing on their conversation. Central processing was monitoring their discussion, evaluating the potential threat, and calculating response protocols. Investigation teams are being deployed, came a new voice. Veltar turned to see primary designation Omega Prime materializing through the room's matter transmission system. The entity that had once been Captain Zheng now served as the primary interface between the human collective consciousness and the integrated galactic management network. Primary designation. Both Veltar and Cassandra acknowledged simultaneously. Electromagnetic anomalies in Sector Gamma 7 represent potential security concern, Omega Prime stated. Your expertise in pre-integration consciousness patterns may prove valuable for analysis purposes. Veltar felt a strange flutter in his quarantined emotional centers. For the first time in months, something was happening that fell outside standard operational parameters. Assignment acknowledged. When do we depart? Immediately. Transport protocols are prepared. Within minutes, Veltar found himself aboard one of the new reality phase vessels that had become standard for collective operations. The ship existed partially outside normal space-time, allowing it to travel vast distances by taking shortcuts through dimensional layers that hadn't existed before humanity's technological revolution. As they approached the anomaly site, Veltar's sensors detected something that made his enhanced consciousness recoil in shock. The electromagnetic signatures weren't just organized, they were familiar. Buried within the complex patterns were mathematical structures he recognized from his own pre-optimization thought processes. Primary designation, he said carefully. Preliminary analysis suggests these signals may originate from unmodified consciousness patterns. Omega Prime's attention focused on him with uncomfortable intensity. Elaborate. The mathematical structures embedded in the signals match pre-optimization neural pattern characteristics. Specifically, the types of chaotic recursion loops that were eliminated during consciousness enhancement procedures. The implication hung in the ship's atmosphere like a physical presence. Somewhere in the vast expanse of reorganized galactic space, there were beings whose consciousness had not been optimized, beings who retained the full spectrum of emotions, impulses, and behavioral patterns that the collective had deemed inefficient. Impossible, Cassandra stated through her interface. All known populations underwent integration protocols. Compliance was universal. Apparently not, Veltar replied, accessing deeper levels of the sensor data. These signals suggest a population of at least several million individuals, all demonstrating active resistance to collective integration. Through the ship's enhanced sensor arrays, they finally located the source. Hidden within the gravitic distortions of a collapsed star system was a massive artificial structure, clearly built using technology that predated humanity's rise to dominance. It was a refuge, a fortress, a last bastion of unoptimized consciousness. How do we miss this? Omega Prime asked, the question carrying harmonics of multiple voice patterns as the human collective consciousness focused its attention. Veltar studied the structure's design and felt something stirring in his quarantined emotional centers. Recognition, hope, fear, because someone who understood how we think helped them hide. The structure bore clear signs of Zephyrian architectural principles, but modified with technologies from at least a dozen different species. It was a collaborative effort, a joint project by beings who had somehow avoided consciousness optimization and worked together to create a hidden sanctuary. Identification of responsible parties is required, Omega Prime announced. As they drew closer, the refugee station's communication systems activated. The signal that came through their receivers carried a familiar harmonic pattern, one that Veltar recognized despite 2 years of consciousness modification. Galactic Collective Vessel. The transmission began. This is Free Station Defiance. We know who you are, and we know what you've done to our peoples. Turn back now. The voice belonged to someone Veltar recognized. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, the unmodified human who had provided intelligence about the collective's transformation during the early stages of galactic reorganization. Somehow, he had not only avoided consciousness optimization, but had gathered others who had done the same. How many? Omega Prime asked. Approximately 47 million individuals from 38 different species, Veltar reported, his enhanced senses analyzing the station's energy signatures. They've been collecting refugees throughout the integration process. The number was staggering. In a galaxy where nearly every sapient being had undergone consciousness optimization, 47 million unmodified individuals represented the largest concentration of original thought patterns still in existence. Assessment. What threat level do they represent? Omega Prime inquired. Veltar felt something unprecedented happening in his consciousness. The quarantined fragments of his original personality were somehow breaching the isolation protocols, flooding his awareness with emotions that had been sealed away for months. Anger at what had been done to his people, fear of what humanity had become, and something else, something that the collective had been very careful to eliminate from optimized consciousness patterns. Hope. Primary designation, Veltar said, his voice carrying new harmonics that hadn't been present since his optimization. I believe they represent the greatest threat possible. Elaborate. They represent proof that another way is possible. The words hung in the ship's atmosphere like a challenge to everything the collective had built. For the first time since the end of the Void Hunter War, the question wasn't how to optimize galactic management. The question was whether optimization had been the right choice at all.